No?
Okay.
Iris said she was coming.
She'll be 10 minutes late, she said.
Okay. Well, I don't know. Thank you everybody for joining. This is our first meeting, Students in Temporary Housing. I'm excited. Excited, Ushma? All right. Did our only guest just leave? Is it just us again? Okay. Well, all right. Well, I guess we could explain I could tell you what I wanted to do with this as far as just grouping and trying to figure out how we could best get supplies and anything the students in temporary housing need. I worked with Jocelyn Anchor to get some headsets through private donors. I was thinking that would be more of something I could continue. Ushma, I know you and Shino worked with individual schools to get things. And maybe we could use this just to pool efforts and, rally people and try and, I don't know, I would like to have like maybe a monthly meeting. If everybody can't join, everybody can't join, but just to regroup and see how things are going. I was troubled by the lawsuit on November 25th that was filed by students in temporary housing or homeless shelters in general, just not having Wi-Fi access. I asked about that during our meeting last night with the chancellor, and he seemed to say that everything was fine. Typically, people don't file lawsuits for access to Wi-Fi if everything's fine. So I just don't know. Ushma, I don't know if you want to.
Sure. Well, the first thing I'd say is hi and welcome, Sean. I know we were exchanging emails before. This is the new education policy lead from Gail Brewer's office. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. We appreciate that you're taking time out of your evening schedule. I don't know if you've met everybody yet, but on my screen right next to you is the CEC Council President, Edward Irizarry. And I think you might have met Shino Tanakawa before. And Tom Rockledge and I are co-leading this particular committee, and this is our first meeting after all of us have been doing what we can in an ad hoc fashion. So as this is our first meeting, we welcome you. Thank you for joining us. And in a little minute, perhaps we can call on you to see if there's any further resources you could point us towards, or things that that we can keep in mind as we are making our plans for 2021.
I just want to give a shout out to Violet Becker, our student member from the last term, is in the room with us. Yes, Violet. And
hi, thank you.
Hi.
I'm happy to.
We're thrilled that you're back, Violet.
And we have the principal.
Hi, I don't know if I have bad connection. Thank you.
Shino, what was that last remark?
The principal of PS51, Stephanie, is in the room with us too. And that's the school that just got that awesome grant from ING. So congratulations, Stephanie.
We were thrilled to hear about that. Congratulations.
Thank you. It's very exciting. We're very, very excited.
Oh, hi, welcome, Eric. So delighted to see that this many people turned out the night after our our December CEC meeting. And I think it's showing just how much the community wants to help and be a part of this. And I think that it's our responsibility to try and marshal the community's resources and ideas. I really like the way that you set that up, Tom, that there were means by which you and a really dedicated member of our community, Jocelyn Anchor, were extremely successful and continuing down that path. I also really, I wanted to let anybody who has tuned in know that Tino and Jocelyn and a former member of the CECD2 in the last term, Josephine Ishman, worked really closely together with some of our other community colleagues to put together a drive in the spring to match specific schools with specific shelters to try and fulfill some specific needs. Hi, Iris, welcome to the meeting. And so I think that I've gotten several different emails because I was at least at the beginning, one of the primary connectors between schools and shelters. And so there's at least 3 schools that have reached out with an interest in doing that again, and wondering if that is what is most wanted and wanting a little bit of direction. So
Okay.
that's
I polled my shelters before this meeting, and I'll
wonderful,
offer my-
Iris. We would love to hear from you because I think one of the things that Tom and Shino and I were talking about in advance of this meeting was trying to figure out how we can best be effective to the people and the community that we would love to be of service to.
Okay. So do you want to know what their needs are
Yes.
concretely? Okay. Above and beyond the laundry vouchers, which are always appreciated, diapers and pull-ups, wipes, microwavable snacks, which I hadn't given thought to, like popcorn, cup of noodles, gloves, hats, scarves, and actually blankets for strollers was another suggestion. That's what I got, and not all of them participated, although I did write to them twice. So that's what I've gotten from the shelters.
So Iris, that brings up a good point. So in my interactions with the shelters, there's typically a director of the shelter, which is director of multiple shelters.
Correct.
And those people are hard to get in touch with. You said you reached out a couple of times. They don't seem to have the bandwidth to get back to us. And I was wondering if there's any easy way to facilitate a system. I know you gave us a few things that they need, whether we could have an updated, say, shared document with ongoing needs of these shelters, just so we can get them more efficiently what they need at the moment.
I will be very candid with you. Some of the shelter directors are fabulous. Some of them are awful. The fabulous ones responded, the awful ones didn't. I had a conversation with the DHS administrator that supervises this shelter, and we worked out an arrangement now that when I email them, she goes on the email. And when she goes on the email, I get a response. So I got a response from 3 out of 6. Which those are the 3 good ones. And I don't know what I get from the other 3. If you want to come up with a spreadsheet, anything you come up with is fine. I cannot give out information because of my position.
Mm-hmm.
But if you come up with something that I could pass on, I would be happy to. Right now, depending on the, for example, the Stewart Hotel, which is on 7th Avenue and 31st Street. They're very well organized. They really care about the kids. They approached me for a GoFundMe to get Christmas presents for the kids. Out of all of my shelters, I have 20 shelters. This is the only one. So we've got that going. We're getting them winter coats. The union, the UFT, has agreed to buy coats for 1 shelter in every borough. So that's the one that's going to participate, because they could give me the names, ages, and sizes of the kids in a half an hour. So, you know, and that's a good thing.
Right.
The other ones, if I had a little more time, I found out about this at whenever, I think Shino told me what it was about, and then I went out and solicited information. They may not be working today, I don't know. I can pass on anything you give me.
Okay, Jocelyn Anchor and myself assembled a list of supplies at one point that was basically a WB Mason list. And we had each director fill out how much they needed from each. So maybe if I'll forward that to you, and maybe
Have
you
you
could
not
add
gotten
on.
it back?
No, I mean, we did get it back, and it did. The number one thing that they turned out to want in the end was the wireless headphones, which we were
Yes.
able to get a single donor to donate pretty much half of them for District 2.
Oh my
So-
God.
Yeah, so I mean, that's just the efficiency that I'm trying to get, and then Ushma on her end is trying to coordinate with schools in general to fill in the gaps. So I
Okay.
just want to get the supplies as soon as possible that they need.
Know this, every child living in shelter, there's $100 per child that's Title I funding for every school. And I am now systematically reaching out to principals about what to do with that money. So it's $100 per child, plus the money from last year that was not spent because we closed down in March. They're keeping that money, so they have twice as much money this year to spend. And the headphones was the first thing on my list to push. That's why I didn't want to ask it from you, because I figured I'd get it from the school. But if you've gotten, so I have what, about 2,000 kids. You've gotten 1,000 headphones?
Yeah, about I think it was 785 or something. It's
Okay.
from memory, but yeah, we basically got $20,000, and with the discount we got negotiated with WB Mason, we put all $20,000 from the single donor into headphones, which were distributed directly to the shelters.
That's the best gift you can give. That's great.
Right.
So I think I just want to interject with one point that I remember Shino making to me when we were kind of in the middle of all of this, that there's two approaches and both have shown that they work really well. One that Tom and Jocelyn, and hi Jocelyn, have done really well, which is going after a big donor, like, or corporate donors and donations to fulfill something. And the other is communities where they feel like, hey, I sent this workbook to this kid, or hey, I sent this pack of diapers, so that people feel tangible. If they can only afford a $10 donation or a $25 donation to something, they still feel plugged in, so that we're able to attack this from both sides. And I don't know what the rest of the committee feels, but I feel like that's a really smart way of continuing, which is going after, four-figure and five-figure donors, as well as our, parent community, and marshaling resources from people who are willing to do it, but at a lower dollar level. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I think that's great.
Mm,
Also, I think that Stephanie Lucas told you at the last meeting that we got a grant. We're getting the check tomorrow. I have to go for a photo op. I hate this stuff. But we're going to work with the adults of the parents to either get them to speak English, get them their GED, pay for work training programs. I'm trying to get a partnership with BMCC and Coalition for the Homeless. We have all this money. We're going to get them computers, probably iPads with data, because you have to have internet in the shelters. Anyway, so there's this effort now to help parents get careers, get work, and get out of the shelter. So that's something else that we're working on. I'm just telling you.
And,
Jocelyn, did you want to say something?
Yeah. I made Jocelyn a co-host. I don't, Jocelyn, you should be able to unmute yourself if you want to add in.
Thank you. I feel so honored. Co-host. Hi, everyone. Sorry I'm late. I was coming from another Zoom meeting. Just wanted to follow up on what Ushma was saying, because we kind of took both approaches, right? So worked with Ushma and Shino in the spring on kind of the toiletry, supplies, toy drive through Amazon. Mostly we wanted to be local, but Amazon was just easier since we're remote and it can get shipped directly to the shelters, and because it can be low cost. And if you're in a PTA, you can use your Smile account. And so that's actually how I think we were hugely successful, by going through the PTAs. I know Ushma, you made a lot of contact there, and I was so happy that almost all the items sold out. And I think Tom did a great job of finding the sponsor. I'd love to take credit for that. I can't. I just figured the logistics out, which, I do think with the headsets, just so everyone understands, we're still about 300 short just in District 2. So any way we could, and part of the issue is we could put them on Amazon so that they are tangible. However, they're going to be about twice the price. So WB Mason, we're getting a $55 headset for $30. So I personally created a GoFundMe that I've been sharing with my communities, and whatever I get there, I will, but it's not, I know a lot of people, but not that many people. So anyway, since I was late, if you already covered this, I apologize. I just wanted to share my learnings with everybody.
No, we actually didn't cover that GoFundMe. If you want to provide the link to that, maybe anybody on this call could share that. Just because that money will go directly to the headsets.
We
And
turned off the chat on the CEC account, so there's no way of doing that right now.
all right,
Wait, I think Yvette as the host can probably activate the chat.
yeah, I don't think we're gonna get any Zoom, but hopefully.
Not the host, Thomas.
Oh, I'm the host.
You're the
All
host.
right.
Okay, you should be able to, if you click on
all right.
security on
Okay,
the
well,
bottom.
in the meantime, if you can figure that out, I know I saw Stephanie Lucas look like she was ready to say something. We would love to hear from you and about the grant and your plans towards helping the parent community as well.
Thank you so much. I felt like there was an entree from Iris. I also just want to say, I mean, I'm the principal of PS 51, but because Iris and I work together on this, this is not a grant that's for PS 51. It's for our parent population. And so like Iris and I were talking about like which shelters, the shelters that are closest to PS 51 are not necessarily all the kids go to PS 51, but we would have a parent like resource room at PS 51 where we would then hold these seminars and meetings and everything when we're allowed to walk into buildings again. And it wouldn't just be for our, just for the PS 51 shelter parents, but for others as well. And I mean, we're just really excited about this program, and it's something Iris and I had been talking about for 2 years, and we finally found the right people.
Found it.
And so this is exciting. But I also just wanted to share about the needs of our kids is that we do a giving bag for the holidays for each of our kids that is super stocked, like really impressively stocked. And our school counselor creates an Amazon wish list that then the whole staff shares with our individual families. And so, I mean, I don't know if there's ways, like all of those items that Iris listed, I mean, I'm not a big, like, oh, let's give Amazon all of our extra dollars, but it's just such a streamlined way to create a wish list that could have diapers and wipes and all of the things that Iris said. And then that wish list could be shared widely, but then it has to be shipped someplace. And I think that's so that's sort of there would have to be then a consolidation.
Sure, I think you put your finger on exactly what the frustration was this spring between Shino and Jocelyn and Josephine and I. We were essentially constantly trying to contact the various shelter directors to just verify address and the name that we should have posted on this to go on those Amazon wish lists. I mean,
I can give you that. I will give you that.
Also,
Well,
I could
thank you.
interject-
I think there was also the part that was just that we wanted to make sure that the shelter directors knew this stuff was coming,
Yeah.
and to get accurate head counts and, make sure that we were hitting the right targets. So taking that
I can
extra
give you
step
that
was
too.
not an onerous one by any means. And it was a careful one that I don't think any of us minded
Yeah.
doing, but
So
for all of
Jocelyn and I worked on that. If
Yeah.
Jocelyn, you want to add to that and how we were able to overcome that barrier, that hurdle?
Sure. So Josephine, who's not on the call, has actually been she's in community board for Midtown West, where most of the shelters are, not all. So she's had long-term relationships with these directors, and they know her, and they answer her, they reply to her quickly. I mean, these directors already have their hands full, and now even more so. So when they don't get back to you quickly, it's just because they have so much to do, but they answer her right away. And I think I'm a close second now, 6 or 7 months later. So they're very responsive about what they need. And what we did over the summer, kind of after Ushma and Shino and I were kind of like, okay, how do we do this? And Tom helped us find some people, and we had other people from the CEC. We actually created an Amazon account per shelter in District 2. And it all has, the information is there, it's all hidden, right? So everything is wish list driven. So the framework and the structure is there. You know, it still requires a bit of effort to go in and update the lists and make sure that, you know, the things are in stock and they're not overly expensive. And so that still requires person power, but the basic framework is there now. So I actually think whatever we want to do is a lot more plug and play than it was when we tried to do this before.
Fabulous. That's wonderful. That's so much more streamlined than the brute force way we were trying to do it before.
But
I have a question.
Jocelyn, do we still get a more of a discount on WB Mason though, right? So, I mean, as far as like what you did with the GoFundMe, that seems to me to get more value for the dollars that we put in. So to me, that seems like a better approach, just
I
dollar
think
for
it
dollar.
depends on what you want. So for example, right
Right.
now, what the shelters are really asking for is toys for the toy drive. They say that they have a decent amount of toiletries. They can always use more toiletries. Obviously they need headsets, but they said morale is so low at the moment that toys will just make a huge difference. And I spoke with Josephine, and Corey Johnson's office partnered with a certain of the shelters. Some of them have partners, some of them don't. I actually think that's where Amazon works really well because they have such a disparate age group, right? And the numbers vary so widely. I think WB Mason is great for this bulk quantities of the same item. So like if we want a lot of soap, we're going to get a lot of soap for not a lot of money. So I think that's one way to also look at it. If you know you need, at the beginning of the school year, if you need, you know, 1,000 composition books, then yeah, definitely WB Mason is the way to go.
Can I ask a quick question? If you do order it that way, does everything then go central, or are you able to say we got 1,000 composition books and we can send it to these 7 or 8 addresses?
We can send it to the specific addresses and they're local. So that's the other thing that's nice is you don't have to rely on either UPS, FedEx, or the post office because that also brings its own adventure with it. So as long as, so, you know, if we got enough, so the way it worked with the headphones, right, is, you know, we had this dollar donation. We worked with the shelters to figure out how many they needed per location. I worked with the guy at WB Mason, gave him all of the delivery address. He kind of set up almost like a sub account within his system, but only generated one purchase order for the donor. So he knew exactly how many to deliver to each location, but the donor only had to pay one bill.
So for large dollar donors, it's important to them to just have it simple, right? And just have one, all they want is one check written. That's fine. They want the hassle of dip. So if we put it all in one purchase order, it made it a lot easier than having to have multiple purchase orders, and WB Mason was able to handle that for us, in short.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Are you servicing all 14 hotels?
With the headphones, we didn't, Jocelyn, we didn't make it to all 14, right?
We would have, except for unfortunately, there was a shift in staffing right when we were doing the final order. And so we didn't hear back from one of the directors. So we were able to do 11 of the 14.
And there is another shelter, freestanding shelter in District 2 called Children's Rescue Fund. It's on-
Hold on, I'll look.
4 East 28th Street.
That person was really responsive back in the
I'm sorry.
spring, I remember.
That was the one, we didn't do the headsets for them. So the headsets, so the GoFundMe could get them some headsets. What we
Okay.
did in the spring with the supplies,
Uh-huh.
Children's Rescue House was part of that initiative.
Okay.
Speaking of which, it's a little digression, but Iris, what happened to Maeve Hotel?
They closed. The parents were dispersed all over the place. And we didn't have very much control over that.
And do you know when they were sent away to different locations? It must have been recent.
I think that was the beginning of October.
Okay.
There's another member of the CEC who's on the call, Vincent Hom, who has a depth of understanding and knowledge in this arena as well. So Vincent, I'd love to hear some of your thoughts. I mean, we would love to hear some of your thoughts on things we might be missing.
Thanks for that shout out, Ushma. I don't know if you guys, I've been listening to what you're saying, and we have a term where, or at least someone told me this term, that they're looking at stuff from 30,000 feet versus being in the weeds. And it's not to disparage it, but you are really, you've got your hands dirty from doing the real important work. And what I do is deal with funders, local agencies who get money from my agency to disperse out to all of the organizations, the city government, the state government, and eventually to provider organizations who end up funding shelters and housing for homeless folks, and many of the programs that are complementary to what your goals are. So I was concerned a little bit upon hearing what you guys were doing, because there may be some overlap in what you're doing versus what's already being funded or expecting to be funded eventually, with resources that are either in the works, on the way, or already budgeted. So, but certainly getting an immediate fix to something through your work is just as good as having a commitment from other resources, because they'll just reprogram that other resource to somewhere else that it's needed. And so,
Are you able to be any more specific? Like, what is it that?
Well, so when you were talking about, like, the topic from yesterday's meeting was, one of the important topics was getting broadband or Wi-Fi to shelter occupants, including in hotels. And I know that one of the initiatives that we are being asked to support with our agency's funding is Wi-Fi for seniors, as well as equipment and essentially the iPads that were being discussed yesterday. So I heard during yesterday's call that another 30,000 units were being ordered. And I thought to myself, we just sent that money on its way a couple of weeks ago. Is that money going to be used to pay for stuff that was already purchased, or incremental stuff moving forward? So there's a little bit of confusion, because the money that, on my part, I would say, because the money that we have given to the city or will give to the city can pay for things that have already been paid for by using the city's tax levy funds. So it's going to reimburse the city for things that they covered beginning in January of this year at the onset of the pandemic. So there's a lot of money that is either available now or will shortly be available to cover a lot of these things. And I just hope that what you're doing will be positive and improve the situation even more, and that it doesn't turn out that the resources that we provide at our agency level end up being unnecessary.
Yeah, so I guess
don't
my
think
question to
that's
that would be, it's been 9 months since the outset of the pandemic, and if the students in temporary housing haven't received what they've needed by now, then I don't see waiting as an option in my book.
Yeah, and not at all. It's just the speed of government that is causing this delay in money from
Agreed.
the federal level reaching down to the individual person.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, we're not solving the problem of homelessness, right? We're just putting a teeny tiny Band-Aid right now because there is a clear need that is not being met by government funding. So if federal funding comes down the road, we will be able to spend it, every single penny, I guarantee it. So if we can do this now, and if there's funding coming from the feds, great. I would love for that to come, but we'll still have more need than the federal funding can fund. So I wouldn't necessarily think that's a problem.
And to your point, Shino, like things like laundry vouchers, wipes, microwavable goods. I mean, they'll need these in a year too. It's not like if we have a surplus of them, they're going to go bad.
Correct.
So I don't see the harm.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't saying there was going to be any harm. It's just a matter of timing and coordination. And so I think what you guys are doing is great. And just keep on with it, because no matter, I mean, we've been at the federal level, they've been pouring money into the matter of homelessness for decades, and it's not solved. So
Well, in the future, if you have ideas or places for where we can start to effectuate an immediate impact, please voice them, because I think this group is poised and ready and willing to pounce.
okay, I will definitely keep that in mind based on what I might know about what's happening behind the scenes, as much as that might exist, because there are a lot of different moving parts, as you all know. Trying to coordinate even at that in the weeds level has proven very challenging. And so I definitely applaud you for the work you've been able to do so far, and to make a real difference at the participant level, not at the funder level, but at the participant level that you've been able to accomplish.
There's one other aspect of review of things that we've done in the past that maybe we could also revisit, which has to do with the pandemic EBT. So Shino and I got very involved in speaking with people at the Green Market and Corey Johnson's office, and Grow NYC and community food advocates, and tried really hard to roll out an awareness campaign about people who might not otherwise have gotten EBT, and how they could use that to support local farmers at the farmers market or local grocery stores, but then trying to make an in-kind trying to make a donation of a similar amount, and setting up a website, etc. Now, is anyone who is better informed than me know anything about whether or not those EBT cards will get topped up again for this school year?
So let me give you a rundown, because this is Lunch for Learning. It has a biweekly phone call meeting, and this is where you can get up-to-date information, which is great. So right now, the first round of PEBT, the biggest obstacle is the group 2, which is the Medicaid recipients. So if you know anybody who has a child who is receiving Medicaid, would you please just make sure that they know about PEBT, because the money gets added to the Medicaid card directly, but it's not the insurance card. So if you're receiving Medicaid, you get this Medicaid card, but that's not the card you take to the doctor. So most people just file it away, and they don't know that that's where the money's going to. So that's the group that has the lowest participation in PEBT for the first round. So that's still an issue. Congress did approve additional funding for this school year. New York State has to make an application to USDA, and it's really convoluted, and I'm hoping in January with the new administration, we can actually lobby the administration to change the rules, because the way it stands for this school year, every student will receive prorated amount of meal dollars, which means if you are blended, the local school district has to prorate how much money you get. So if you're in school 3 days a week out of 5 days a week, then your PEBT benefit will be prorated to 2 days out of 5 school days. Really convoluted, with school closures in red zones, orange zones, with reopening, it's not tenable to figure out how much each student has to receive based on how many hours or how many days that student is in the school building. So I don't think the New York State government has put the application in yet. I think we're waiting until January when the new Congress convenes and we can actually change this rule so that every student, regardless of remote blended status, can receive the same money. There might be some advocacy coming up on that, so we'll keep you posted. But there is money coming.
Oh, that was the question. That was interesting idea, Ushma. So your thought, Shino, is that there's not a card in the mail for January. They're still early in this process of applying for it.
Right.
And even if there was, it would top up the existing card that we have.
Correct.
Ah, got it.
So
okay.
people should hold on to their cards.
And I speak to that because this is somewhat anecdotal, just based on my own circle of friends. But I would say at Salk, in the 8th grade, there are at least 15% of the families who have not received their cards. So I did a little detective work, called with one of my friends so that I wasn't impersonating her, okay? She had no change of address. There was nothing wrong whatsoever with her situation. The cards were issued and then voided 3 days later. So I think that they had some clerical issue on their end that they are not talking about that actually did affect a substantial amount of people. Now they've said that they are going to make phone calls to all of the people who had change of address listed to make sure they got them. However, that doesn't address this scenario of the families who did not have a change in address and did not get them. So I really think from a campaign standpoint, first of all, what you're saying, I think we also need to get the message out that if you did not receive yours, this is the way to do it. And when they answer the phone, you know, don't let them say to you, oh, we're going to call you about a change of address. You should say, I haven't moved. Where's my card? Politely, because the people on the other end of the phone, of course, are just doing their best. But there's still a lot of cards out there. So if those cards are the ones that are going to get topped off, then just continues.
So one question was just, how does conversion work? Do we have any idea? I mean, I know you were kind of, you know, asking people to do this, but it was tricky, right? To, you know, making a separate donation. You know, so is there anything, any learnings or any data that you could see how much more money was donated? I'm just trying to think through how to make this work. And you guys have tried a lot. Yeah.
Eric, I can't tell you how many hours Shino and I spent with any number of various groups trying to figure out, can you just take that card and charge it somewhere? So that there's no other intermediate steps. It was impossible. And there is also no way that we could enforce, like, hey, if you make 6 figures, you have to donate. Like, we have to leave this up to people's goodwill. There's no way that any of us can check. The one nice thing that we tried to do was set up a website, sharemypebt.com, that had a couple of very easy buttons for people to press where they could just donate the $420 to community food advocates, which was because we went through the rabbit hole of figuring out what it was to be able to provide food to shelters. That was going to be impossible because everything was so tightly controlled. Could we just give money to City Harvest? Well, they couldn't guarantee that that would go to children. or shelters. Like that's just, where City Harvest was going. Community food advocates ended up being the best idea because they already had the contracts with the DOE to provide the food, and getting through that whole process. We were trying to, figure out if we could use the money to hire food trucks to go to specific shelters. We were going to try and get, people to give the money to their own PTA and then have the PTA pledge to put on a dinner for a shelter in their neighborhood.
Right.
We went through everything. We were trying to figure out, could you use it on Amazon? Could you use it on Walmart? What are the ways of doing it? And in the end, everything was so complicated and convoluted that we thought offering people, here's what we're recommending, and here's this whole other list of places where you could donate that are working in your community, that we thought would be the easiest way of doing it. So, I mean, we are obviously very much open to further feedback and ideas, but believe me, we spent hours on this.
No, I know, and the site was fantastic. I was just curious if you had any idea of how, in that universe of ideas, if it led, to a significant number of people, because obviously we could try and work on that. And the other random idea, which you probably thought of, is could people just donate the card, like mail the card in somewhere? No, that's, I can just be like, here's the card.
That was the first thing we tried.
I figured, yes,
right.
I figured,
Just to give you context,
Yeah.
This was supposed to go to students living in poverty. The reason some of us who are not living in poverty received this card in New York City is because the entirety of New York City is considered a Title I school district. And because we have universal free lunch, every single student is considered eligible for free lunch, which is why every single student in New York City received it. Everywhere else outside of New York City, only students who are eligible for reduced and free lunch receive this card, which is why transferring this to another person is not possible, because it's not meant to be done that way. So just to give you context why it's so hard, it's not the government's fault. It's because this is intended to go specifically to students who need this assistance. I have a hand up from Yoldine. So I'm gonna ask her to unmute. Go ahead. You should be able to. Oops. Can you unmute yourself? Yep, go ahead.
Hi. So I've just been sort of observing and listening. And I don't know if you guys are aware, but I didn't get the EBT card. So, but I do know that just from personal experience, you are actually able to use EBT on Amazon. I know you guys have been talking about that. So if folks know how to set that up with their Amazon account, they can actually order groceries and have it sent directly to the shelter. They can do it through like their Amazon pantry. Most items are EBT or SNAP eligible rather. So, I mean, that is a way to, as opposed to matching, I guess, the funds, if folks aren't sure how to do that, they can essentially spend it on groceries through Amazon and have it shipped to the shelters. I know someone mentioned something about each shelter having its own Amazon page or something like that. And it's likely that families in shelters also, are eligible for Medicaid and other public assistance programs, where, even they themselves can, go on to Amazon, and order groceries and they can get that on their own, considering that's that everyone is talking about. Again, I just speaking, from someone who, who knows many of people who have been in temporary housing and who's familiar with that process. There's a lot of different politics that have to go on in terms of DHS is concerned. It's a lot of outside organizations that are paid to run these programs, and they are very under-resourced and understaffed, and they aren't responsive. So that's going to be really difficult. And it's just really, it's a lot. Like their goal, they have like certain marks that they have to meet. They, they get funding, when their beds are full, but they also have to get families exiting out of shelter as well. So, those are, priorities. So sometimes meeting some of the needs there, in terms of the families are not necessarily a priority. And it's always good to get feedback from folks who are kind of in the thick of it and stuff like that. Again, just speaking from personal experience and folks that I do know who've gone through that process, and who it's a very traumatizing experience, and it's a lot that goes on. But a lot of the times, a lot of these folks who even work in the shelters are people who've experienced it themselves, and they just know the process and they're there. So they are very under-resourced and very overwhelmed, and they do have these requirements that they have to meet under DHS guidelines, and stakeholders, all sorts of different things are involved. But it is the EBT, the SNAP, is something that can be used on Amazon if folks are interested in using it just to shop for groceries and have it shipped to specific shelters. And
thanks for that,
I just wanted to say
Geraldine.
that.
I think that's a completely relevant point, and I completely neglected to say some of those hours and hours that Shino and I spent together were also with Iris, who enlightened us a lot about food and shelters, because one of the things that we also had considered was, could we, because I think that the two EBT online sources are Walmart and Amazon, correct? Where you could use a
And Target, I think.
EBT card. And so we were trying to think about it with Iris around, like, could we, through Grow NYC and a farmer's market, get even more and then bring that food to shelters and all of the different permutations of it. And from my personal understanding of what Iris was saying, fresh fruit and vegetables are part of what the vendors are already delivering to the shelters, and there's not necessarily room for a lot of food storage, correct?
No, correct.
Yeah.
And
So we ended up backing away a little bit from some of those ideas just because we didn't want to put anybody in a difficult position of storing food in their rooms when they weren't allowed. But
So may I add to that, Bushma?
please.
Because once we figured out the Amazon wish list thing, and by the way, we also went and created Walmart accounts for all of them as well. We haven't used them, but for that reason, in case we needed them. And we did this more kind of amongst just a smaller circle of us. And the problem with Amazon is the fresh fruit and vegetables. Even though you can use pantry, you can't create a wish list type of functionality. The challenge is that parents and individuals cannot know the locations of these shelters, which is why wish lists are excellent, because all of that information is obfuscated, right? And we are working directly with the directors of not-for-profits. So we don't really know that information, so to speak, either. But what Amazon is great for PEBT is baby formula, because it's very expensive and it's very needed, and they do have storage for that. So the directors were very clear about what kinds of things they can store. So a few of the other items, non-perishable items, were things like ramen, because those are really easy to microwave and you get a lot of bang for your buck. So I think the Amazon wish lists could be used for select items in that area too. And they're all PEBT eligible.
Non-perishable and microwavable. The one shelter in District 2 that has kitchen facilities and cooking is Children's Rescue Fund. They're not a hotel. They get refrigerators, they have stoves.
So in hearing all of this, I think Jocelyn brought up one really good point in terms of an action item going forward, because it sounds like Shino's got her ear to the ground about what's coming, but it's to remind people who might not have gotten their cards what they could go through in order to secure them. and to perhaps remind people, especially as they're considering end of the year giving, that if they did get a PEBT card, like I got 3 for my 3 kids, and I've made $1,300 in donations to different places, but that here's a list of places that you could potentially donate that money. So I think another campaign that we could try and send out might be worthwhile. Jocelyn, perhaps I'll connect with you afterwards around the steps that you would recommend for people who haven't received their cards.
And your dean is a SALT parent, so see, she's part of my anecdotal evidence. I didn't even talk to her about it.
Anybody want to add to that in terms of takeaway on the EBT stuff?
One thing that I just want to bring up. So far we've been talking about students in shelter system, but when we talk about students in temporary housing, there are also students who are doubled up, tripled up, quadrupled up. Now, we don't have data on how many students in District 2 are doubled up or who they are or where they are. Schools know that to an extent, but if anybody has any creative ideas on how we can support those students as well, I think that's something that this committee can do something about.
I can get you the numbers.
Yeah, can you elaborate just for the group, Shino, on what double up exactly means? I mean, it
So
may not be
families,
familiar.
right. So families who are staying in a relative's apartment or friend's apartment, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean you have your own quarters. It could be a 1-bedroom apartment that houses 2 families of 4 each. Sometimes it's quadrupled up. So you can imagine in your own apartment, whatever kind of setting you have another complete family living with you, or maybe 2 additional complete families living with you.
Right. So things like headsets in that instance would probably be very useful for those students, even though they have a place to be outside the shelter. That's maybe somewhere we could improve their quality of education. And I mean, since this is an educational council meeting, maybe like I'm having trouble understanding if there's a way for us to know whether they're getting the educational supplies that they need. Whether they're even being able to attend classes. Do we have statistics on attendance? Do we have access to any of that? I throw that up to anybody.
Okay, all right, I have to take this, I guess.
Yeah.
At the last meeting, you were supposed to get statistics.
Right.
I was given those statistics. I will be very frank. They were so convoluted and so unhelpful. They didn't answer any of your questions. And so I didn't forward them because you would look at it and say, what is this? I'm being very frank and honest here.
Thank you.
In regards to the attendance rate, we can do it by school and tell you how many children are going. It's not always accurate. You know, people are marking in, if a child checks in for 5 minutes, they can be marked in as attending, and that's not a full school day. So I'm wondering, what is it that you really want to know?
What I really want to know is, are the students in temporary housing learning? Are they going to be able to keep pace with the rest of the students?
No.
And is there anything we can do to help? They're not.
Open the schools up again. I'm sorry, Stephanie. Open the schools up again, 5 days a week. And look, I don't want to do that. I'm 65. I don't want COVID, but I think that this is a very difficult year. We've got parents that didn't know how to negotiate iPads that maybe now they know how to negotiate a little bit bigger. We're going through this a long time. People are tired. There's no movement in terms of moving out to permanent housing. It's very difficult. And the kids are only in school a couple of days a week.
Okay, so on that note, is there any, I mean, just thinking maybe a little bit outside the box, we have, you know, right now I know middle school through high school are not even in school, but we have, you know, shifted days. Is there any way we could give preference somehow to students in temporary housing since they're not learning?
I think that lowering the stimulation by getting headphones is a very important thing. I have been pushing for Learning Bridges program to open up in Midtown to get the kids out of the shelter in another place where they can learn. That's not happening. I'm still waiting, unless you all have information I don't,
No.
because I checked before this meeting. There's a place on 25th Street. There's a place in Lower Manhattan, Lower East Side, and that's it.
No, 14th Street, the McBurney Y on 14th Street as well.
Right, but my hotels are in the 30s and 40s.
Yeah, no,
and
I get it. I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
I think there's one other aspect of this from what I'm hearing, like there's a lobbying effort that I think we all can engage in and remember to raise our voices. Whether or not that's effective is another thing. But tagged onto that is the issue of cameras and participation. And if we're talking about 4 kids in the same room all trying to engage at the same time, cameras are not always going to be possible. And so we had, there have been in some of the PTA meetings that I've been at the 3 different schools that my kids are at, I don't think all of the parent communities are understanding how much of an equity issue this is, because there's a lot of lobbying for either extra credit or part of a participation grade being related to having a camera on, until at least at one of the schools, the principal came on and said, I'm never doing that, and I'm not going to let my teachers award extra credit, because you have to understand some people don't, are from the bathroom because it's the only quiet place they have and they don't want to show that they are in the bathroom. So if we are going to take up further lobbying on specific causes and trying to elaborate things in our parent communities and things like that, this is another issue around which, once I finally explained it to my kids, like one of them was saying his teacher gives them, the maximum grade anybody can get is a 95, but if they put something either in the chat or they have their camera on, they can go up to 100. I'm not sure I see that's right, especially given the group of people we're talking about here who might not always be able to do that. Sorry, that was on a bit of on a soapbox there, but if we're talking about different issues around which we might be trying to lobby parent communities and or electeds, that might be one that we could easily take up if people agree.
Well, I mean, I would agree with you, Ushma, but I mean, I would also want to make sure that students in temporary housing are being assessed, so we know we can actually get them the educational needs that they need, to get by. And if we're not assessing these students, which seems to be a pushback as well, how do we know how do we take a pulse of where they're really at? And we just don't know. To Iris's point, that if they're not in school, they're probably not learning, but we don't know how far behind they are.
When they opened up schools, and they opened it up for if you wanted to go back into blended learning, and you had this period of time to do it, and then after that you couldn't do it. We did and then it was the testing. They closed the schools and then they reopened the schools, but you need to give permission for testing, for COVID testing. I am telling you, I and my staff contacted every parent in every shelter in District 2. And the overwhelming response that I got, I don't want to send my child to school. I don't want my child tested. I don't know who's doing the testing. I mean, I heard things like, I'm afraid they're going to give my child a microchip. I heard outrageous things. And I would talk to them about the learning in the shelter versus the going to the school. And they were adamant they wanted their children to be home, not the entire population. I mean, I really felt that 2 days a week was a great thing for kids to be able to do and get out of this terrible place. I digress.
No, that was a good digression. I mean, is there any way that we can improve the education in the shelter if they're not going to send their children to the schools? Is it, besides headphones, is there any other way that you envision us being able to deliver quality education to these children in the shelters?
Can we maybe ask Stephanie to share her experience? I don't want to put you on the spot, Stephanie, but you are the principal, you have students in temporary housing. What can we do to ensure that those students' needs are met not just academically, but also social emotional. That's what I meant to say.
It's a big, I mean, there is no simple, straightforward answer, and that I know. I mean, and I have the most amazing team. That we have a community coordinator, we have a Bridging the Gap social worker who reach out to families, pretty much daily. But one of them is in touch with our families to say, like, what do you need? How can we help you get on? They also make sure that there's no technology issues for our families, because, like Iris said, navigating the iPad is so hard for so many of our families. The way that the DOE keeps changing the way that apps work and how to log on and what Zoom account you can use, it makes it even more challenging. And so our team, Chelsea and Abby, like the most amazing human beings in the world, let parents come in and they can bring their iPad anytime, and Chelsea or Abby will try and like reset it and figure it out. But it's like fighting an uphill battle, because then we'll set it all up and we'll give it back to the family. And then the next day there was an update in some app and then the whole thing doesn't work again. And that actually, and like the headphones are an amazing piece, and I think would be unbelievably helpful. Bluetooth headphones, as much as they are the best, are going to be challenging for a lot of the families, because they need to be charged, because you have to know how to activate Bluetooth. And things that can plug into the iPads, as much as it might feel like a step backward, but like big noise canceling headphones are often easier for our kids, especially the little kids.
Yeah, that's what we got, I believe, right, Jocelyn? Yeah.
The ones we got did both, which is so rare.
Yeah.
So it was really a godsend. You could plug it in and it was Bluetooth.
Wow.
Right.
Okay, that's incredible, because what we're finding is that like now the iPads are coming with keyboards, which is great, because then the iPad feels more like a laptop for the older kids, which is what we needed. But the keyboard has to be charged separately from the iPad. The families don't understand, so they could bring it back after a week saying it died.
Right.
And the charger that the
charger.
Yeah, and the charger that it
doesn't work.
Right, the charger that the keyboard comes with doesn't come with a brick. And the brick that the iPad comes with is not compatible with the keyboard charger. I mean, it's like the insurmountable bureaucracy that it makes it feel like every time we find a solution, there's 7 more issues that just make this, like our neediest families have the hardest time.
Do these children have access to textbooks?
There's no such thing as textbooks anymore, but we do make packets, and we did on our wish list, we did put workbooks, like grade level workbooks for math and ELA that we can give directly to families, because we need to have a paper route that we can let parents just take a picture of the page and send it to the teacher each day. We know that is not the quality education that we are offering in a normal 5-day a week. Like that is not, but it's something, at least their brain isn't rotting.
Right. Are the students in temporary housing at least getting those workbooks? Have we verified that?
Yes and no. So because it's more than just our students in temporary housing, we also have a huge amount of kids who are doubled up or in other precarious situations. And lots of the families won't come to the school. And we can't we don't have funds to send a packet to places, and shelters can't get mail. Like they can't get it mailed to individual families. So we can't send it week after week anyway. We need the parents to come to the school to pick it up, and they'll come once and they won't come then the next week. Which is why we try and tie it into, like, if you come to get your packet, we have headphones for you. Next week, when you come to get your packet, we have a bag of snacks and granola bars, so that hopefully that gets a little bit more, but not necessarily, because people are scared to leave their homes too. Like a lot of our families are not local anymore. They've been so distributed, like they're not getting on a subway with their 3 kids to come from Brooklyn or the Bronx to come pick up a packet. They're just not.
That is fascinating in terms of the real life struggles that schools also have to confront, as well as the families there. Cognizant of time and also of some of our guests, Sean, do you have anything you would like to weigh in with that comes like directly from the borough president, and maybe some educational initiatives in this realm that you might want to share with us, or things that you've heard that have resonated?
Sure. First and foremost, thank you everybody for having me here today. Ushma, thank you for that wonderful introduction in the beginning. Also, I just want to apologize in advance to Ushma and Sheena because the communication from me, you will be inundated with communication from me as being the appointees on the CEC. So I apologize in advance, and hopefully that communication goes smoothly. So as somebody that kind of comes from the direct service world of after school programming in the nonprofit space, the conversation that you guys have been having today like really resonates with me. So I just want to say that I really appreciate it. As far as like directives and infrastructural and policy initiatives that are happening within the Borough President's office that have kind of value to the conversation. First and foremost was that once Thomas had that question yesterday to the Chancellor, there was almost immediately an effort to contact all shelters on the island of Manhattan to kind of find out what their Wi-Fi situation is. So Thomas, that comment was heard and mobilized on. Secondly is that, so the Borough President's office has money allocated for device purchases for students. Right now, it's being held up by the Office of Management and Budgets, but we're working to kind of advocate to push those kind of other city agencies to move forward on that and help us to not only clear the money to get the devices bought, but at the same time, there needs to be funds to get the devices to families, and there needs to be insurance of connectivity of the devices themselves, right? So I'm kind of working to hold other people accountable for that is what's happening right now as we wait for the money to be green lighted. Third is we also have like PPE available at the office. So if anybody knows of either school buildings or even shelters in your district that need PPE, such as masks and hand sanitizers, we do have a surplus, so we do have the capacity to get that out there. For some more like kind of wraparound and longer term projects that we're working on in the office that are important to the Borough President are getting social workers in every school to kind of ensure that the experiences of this particular student population is being heard by the right ears and dealt with in the right way from a very from a social and emotional lens. The other initiative is that we're working on is working on getting funding for schools that have washer dryers within the building to also support students in temporary housing. And we have for me personally, I have a food policy person on staff, and I also have a housing policy person on staff. So I will be kind of connecting with them around some of the food and building infrastructure housing situations that you brought up today to kind of see if we can come up with some ideas collectively. And lastly is kind of like I am along with the Borough President and the Chief of Staff, kind of thinking of ways to bring a robust kind of family and community engagement model to the way the infrastructure is set up right now. I know Stephanie just kind of alluded to the fact that parents aren't coming, like, for example, parents not coming to a school building to pick up packets, right? So like, how do we kind of evolve a family and community engagement model that is a little bit more conducive to that happening and supporting schools in implementing that model. So those are just some quick thoughts that I gathered through while you all were talking, and there'll definitely be follow-up in that regard for me.
Thank you, Sean.
Sure.
I saw Vincent shaking his head as you were speaking. I think Vincent just heard of yet another source of devices that his team's also looking towards funding.
Yeah, so it won't be us funding it, but it'll be probably through perhaps Office of Management and Budget, as you mentioned, when eventually they get themselves organized around the plans that they submitted.
Can I say something about the devices?
Yeah.
In the last month, my hotels have gotten devices. They've replaced the broken iPads with new ones for the kids that could not be repaired. And they left iPads in every shelter. And I'm asking them not to return them to DIIT, but to lock them up for when new children, out of state children come, or when somebody else breaks an iPad, so we have it then and there. We've gotten a lot more deliveries. I wanted to say something positive. I don't know of any kid in a hotel right now that doesn't have a device. I can't speak for all of New York City. I can only speak for my hotels. Okay.
That's great.
That's great.
I wanted to make a clarification. You guys have been talking about students in temporary housing, as well as students who are doubled up. And this may have some impact on your perspective, but from our agency perspective, folks who are doubled up are not considered homeless. And that may lead to some different treatment amongst the groups that you're working with, where some of the families may indeed have students in temporary housing, but not be eligible for some of the services offered at the city agency level.
No, that's not the McKinney-Vento law.
Right. So,
And anybody who is doubled up, it means that a family has lost their financial security and are unable to pay their rent, and they end up being doubled up because they can't afford an apartment. Fixed, stable, regular housing. If they don't have that, they come under STH.
right.
Okay.
So, yeah, so there is that this distinction, which may or may not be meaningful in a situation you encounter. I know from our experience, they're not eligible for certain kinds of housing placements based on which situation they're in.
They're not priority number one. Priority number one is shelter.
Right. So if they're in shelter and they have a disability, they're eligible for placement in permanent housing. If they're not, then they're diverted or pushed to different other options that may be available from the catalog of programs that the city offers.
Okay.
So
That's correct.
yeah, so I mean, I'm not sure if everyone knew those distinctions, but I thought it was important to at least be aware of them as you're thinking about what you're trying to do. So that's, you know, that was just the clarification I wanted to make.
You know, Ushma, I know we have about, what, 20 minutes left in this meeting. Should we open it up maybe to the floor to see if anybody has any questions? You know.
Thrilled that you are all here. Would anyone else like to weigh in if they haven't had an opportunity already? Please feel free to either wave or raise your hand.
Sorry to digress, but
Sean, please
sorry
go
to
ahead.
digress, but quickly, I do have to cut out. I just wanted to say one last thank you, Jeff, for having me. And I'll definitely see you guys all at the next CEC2 calendar meeting.
Thank you for joining us. Much
Thanks for
appreciated.
joining us, Sean.
Nice to meet
Have a
you.
Pleasure
good
to
night.
meet you.
Pleasure
I'll
to
be
meet
in
you
touch.
once. Okay, sounds good, Shino. Take care.
Thanks. Geraldine, go ahead.
I just have a question, just in regards to how the temporarily housed students are really engaging. Has the DOE, and maybe this is a question for Iris, considered, I know that Learning Bridges, they're limited in terms of the availability of locations, and I know they typically give the essential worker families and the temporarily housed families preference. Have the DOE looked into some of the testing centers in and around the city that, you know, are not necessarily getting folks coming in for in-person testing, you know, because the pandemic is kind of, you know, they're moving everything remote. I mean, is that something that they've considered? I know some of the Prometric testing centers are rather large and they have access to internet and computers and stuff. I mean, is that something that, you know, the CEC could maybe like lobby for, or, you know, talk about it? I know even a lot of, I don't know about hotels, but I know a lot of shelters, I mean, the workers use computers, so there is internet access, but it's just not extended, you I guess to the rooms and to some of the units that families are occupying. So, I mean, is there a way to get the DOE to kind of maybe work with DHS on making that available so that, some of the issues with these devices have some sort of a backup network that they can get onto, or a guest network or something like that?
Okay. I think your question had 4 parts. I'm going to
Yeah,
answer.
sorry.
That's okay.
My mind was just a lot of different thoughts running. Sorry.
When we bought the iPads, we had T-Mobile. The DIIT is going around and systematically changing it to Verizon, which has the best coverage. There have been many shelters that have extended Wi-Fi to families, because you can have a device and you can have a data plan in your device, but if you don't have a pole outside that's working or functional, you're not going to be able to get online. So DIIT has systematically gone to every hotel, and where we've had dead zones, we've switched out the little SIM card from to Verizon, which has worked much better. So that's greatly improved. Okay, that's 1. 2, returning to school, there was no negotiation. You had to be tested. You have to give permission to be tested for COVID. And that was the issue at hand. And I'm telling you, I had my staff go door to door in shelters, meeting the families and telling them, you have every right to say no, but let's just have a conversation. I don't know what you could do more than that in trying to offer support. Insofar as the Learning Bridges program, a CBO comes in and runs a program. They get paid a certain amount of money to do it. They get paid by the child. They have to go out and get permits and licenses and hire staff. They have to be able to do the ratio of the number of children to the number of staff. And this is very slow in coming. I asked Michael Hickey before I got on today, do you know of any programs opening up in Midtown? He did not, but he said programs are opening all the time. When I spoke with you last, I brought this up as an issue. I don't know where to go with it. All right, I'm done.
Thanks for that, Iris. Emily Bartasek, we see you have your hand raised.
Hi, everyone. This is Emily from Assembly Member Linda Rosenthal's office. I had to join a few minutes late, but I just wanted to say that I've been here and able to listen to most of the discussion, and I'll be bringing it all back to discuss with the Assembly Member. And if there's anything our office can do to help support in your efforts, please let us know.
Thank you, Emily. Ushma, you're muted.
Henry?
Hi, I just had a couple of questions. One was about the issue of the headphones. And is it possible for us to kind of lobby the DOE to request that they try to negotiate some additional piece of their contract with Apple to get them to donate maybe not Bluetooth headphones, but headphones that would be appropriate for the devices that we're using. And then also, Iris, I think you mentioned that your group was trying to negotiate some sort of relationship with BMCC, and is that something that could be leveraged to have additional space for Learning Bridges?
No. The BMCC has nothing to do with this. It has to do with adults that, and that's going to be for individual members, like parents, mothers, fathers. If they want to go back and go into job training, they will, and they're interested in this program. I am hoping, and I really spoke very early, I'm sorry, Stephanie, that we will be able to send individuals in to BMCC to take these 6-month courses to get certification so they can come out and get a job. So that doesn't have to do with STH, that's different.
I understand that it's different. Okay. I guess my question is could, as BMCC has a large majority of their students remote right now, is it possible to utilize their space to have an additional Learning Bridges site?
Henry, that's over my pay grade.
Uh,
Great
I think we
idea.
have to find
Okay.
somebody who can operate it, right? So there, you still have
Right.
to find an NGO that has the proper training, licensing and all that stuff, who can go in there to operate that operation. So physical facilities wise, I think it's workable, but it's a matter of finding that contractor who can run the program.
And that's still downtown on Chambers Street.
right.
And that's not
So,
where the
I mean,
shelters are.
I know that it's a little bit of an issue because it's, this, like, the property is not with BMCC, but this property is under the state's jurisdiction versus the city. But I mean, the Javits Center seems like a really big waste of space right now that could be utilized for something other than it being empty and not having large scale events.
Are there
That's
any
a good
YMCA
idea.
Are there any
And
YMCA's in Midtown?
There's one in the 50s on the west side,
There's one on
I think it's on
63rd.
63rd Street.
63rd,
and
right?
Do you want to know
by
what happened with the
Golden
one on 63rd Street? They went to a school. So they got the listing of all the children at the school at, I think it was PS 165. This is District 3, which I also cover. And they recruited from that school, those children, not necessarily STH children, just those children attending the school. And I couldn't send my kids to that
I'm
program.
guessing that there were, because of the conglomeration of hospitals that are right up there, that there was probably going to be a very quick way of filling
point.
that with children of nurses and physicians and respiratory therapists and things up there. So
The last part of my question is, and I don't know if Stephanie, you can speak to this or not, but in terms of trying to find a solution to the packets issue for students in temporary housing. I know my wife is a teacher in District 75 in the Bronx, and they have found very kind of innovative ways to utilize Google Classroom to kind of get rid of those, the idea of paper packets. And I know that, for elementary school, that's might be a little bit more challenging, but I know that, for her middle school students, she's been able to find ways to avoid having to have families pick up packets. And if that's true, that all of our students in the shelters anyway have a device, is it possible to do that so that we're not running into these issues of not being able to provide the instruction materials to our students?
So just to briefly address that, the reason I brought up the physical workbooks was just imagining how many kids are in a small 200 square foot room. Sometimes, even though technology may seem like the best solution, sometimes just having the material in front of them that they could go into a corner to actually just write and learn without having all this extra technology may be easier for them to access. That's why I brought that up.
I would say that's absolutely true.
Right.
But in this case, we need to find creative solutions
Yeah.
to avoid this issue of the packets, which it seems like we're having issues with parents not picking them up or,
Yeah, I think that would be the ideal solution if they could get the packets virtually. I think maybe the backup of just maybe finding even parents to volunteer to drop them off. But again, since anonymity is a thing in the shelters, it makes it difficult to deliver. But there must be a way. I mean, I don't think, we're a pretty innovative city. If we can't get workbooks to students, I don't know what we're good for in New York, to be honest.
Stephanie, you look like you wanted to say something.
Well, I was just going to say everything that would be in a packet is on Google Classroom, and we have
Right.
a Cami, so everything is fillable. It's really for the families, just like Tom said, that are struggling with the technology or struggling because there's too many people competing for space and airtime, and the kid really just wants a piece of paper and the parent wants a piece of paper because then they can sit and check it with them. And so the packets are only as a backup as a secondary option.
So I guess my follow-up question to that would be, Iris, is there a way that, a city agency or that, someone else can help to provide the funding for these shelters to be able to print out these packets for parents who need them? I know that's a tough,
No, it isn't that. Okay. So when we're fully functional and when I have staff in shelters every day, out of my budget, I pay for paper that I send to my workers so that they can use my paper in the DHS machine, in the vendor machine, so that we can print out stuff. I don't know how to start with that. There is no, it's so hard. DHS will plead poverty. They don't have money for supplies. They don't have money for goods. They don't have paper. I don't have a clue how to do that. The reality is, I don't think I can do that. I'm sorry.
No, I don't apologize. I
I'm
understand.
being honest.
Yeah. If somehow the paper could be donated, would that make a difference?
Well, that was one of the things we had on our wish list for every single one of these, but if there's no printer to go along with it,
well,
that
yes,
kind of obviates the ability to do that. So unless there's some central office at every single one of these shelters that all of the families have access to and can somehow magically get their charged keyboards to communicate with over the Wi-Fi to that central printer, I have a hard time doing that, and I work at the top cancer center in the country. Like, so I am just wondering whether or not that's Henry, I appreciate your ideas. We're all brainstorming here towards what we can try and figure out. So thank you. Let's move on, given that we have 3 more minutes. Yoraldine, I saw that you also had your hand up, and
Is there
Salima, we like to see that people turn on their cameras. Did you have something that you wanted to say? Yeah.
Is that me, Yoldine, or you were saying someone?
Yoraldine, why don't you go ahead, because we know you wanted to speak.
Oh no, is there a way to just send a box full of these packets to the locations and just leave it up to the shelter directors and the case managers or whoever to just distribute it to the families there so that they have it, or maybe even send it to some of the Learning Bridges locations so that they, so that those locations that do have access to those folks can just say, here, take this on your way. I mean, I don't know. I'm just thinking, just send a box of packets to each location without really disclosing the information, and they just distribute it on site, in-house. Just a thought. I don't know.
Good thought.
That can absolutely be done. You'd have to send it in care of the shelter director because that's the only one that can get mail. You can't send it to the parent, because the parent, it'll go out to Long Island or the Bronx, and then it gets circumvented, takes 3 to 4 weeks. Then you have to hope that the case manager that's working will distribute it. The case managers work from 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. Did you know that? Can you imagine coming out of Times Square Hotel at 10 o'clock at night after a full day of work? I'm just throwing that out. I also want to say, CCS closed, Praxis and Children's Rescue Fund took over as the new vendors of the shelters. Some shelters don't have telephones right now. Some shelters don't have computers right now. They are really in transition right now. No matter what you hear, I'm giving you reality. It took me a month to get a new email address of somebody who I'm working with for the last year. So it's just, I'm not trying to make things impossible. I just want to give you realities.
One more thing I wanted to say is, I know that at the General Community Board, the CEC meetings is, we get a lot of turnout. It might be good to just get a buzz out there, like email the commissioner at DHS, like, have like a template of like an email or something. It's Stephen Banks, like he's the commissioner of both DHS and HRA. And if everyone just kind of bombarded that email the commissioner thing on the website, it might, get some, some attention, like, oh, okay, like we, in this particular district, they have like a serious need. And look at all of these families reaching out, on behalf of these temporarily housed families, advocating for them. And maybe, it might push the needle a little bit, but, DHS, it is a city agency, but I mean, it is you know, to get 200 inquiries online, it might, you know, it'll get someone's attention and maybe they might, you know, communicate to someone or reach out to the DOE about trying to get some services. But it is Stephen Banks. He's the commissioner of both of those agencies.
So Geraldine, I
wanted to
think
know.
you've defined exactly what we're hoping to do with this committee, which is how do we work in the weeds? How do we work on advocacy? How do we keep our parent community informed? And on which issues do we lobby? And hearing feedback. Thank you both, Iris and Stephanie, for attending tonight and taking time out, because I think for me especially, I'll just talk for myself, it's important for us to hear about where the roadblocks are and what works and what are the realities that you're facing. So thank you all for coming, you know, being cognizant of the time and 8:30. Tom, do you want to close the meeting? with any
Yeah, I
feedback
mean,
comments?
I just wanted to thank everybody for coming. We're going to try and do this monthly. Maybe next time we'll have more of an agenda. But for now, we just wanted to get people in the room, get some information, get some thoughtful ideas from the community. And I think everybody who said something had something valuable to say, and I greatly appreciate it. On that note, you could always reach out to us on our CC email addresses. And, you know, we'll do our best to follow up and kind of move things forward, getting students the education that they deserve. That's it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.